Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Jai Gurudev. As is customary in our tradition, let us begin by chanting the Aghora mantra. Aghorebhyo tagorebhyo ghora ghora tarebhyascha sarvata sharva sarvebhyo namaste rudra rupebhya. Aghorebhyo tagorebhyo ghora ghora tarebhyascha sarvata sharva sarvebhyo namaste rudra rupebhya. Aghorebhyo tagorebhyo ghora ghora tarebhyascha sarvata sharva sarvebhyo namaste rudra rupebhya. Today is the Jayanti of Ācārya Abhinavagupta. I offer my humble prostrations to Ācārya, to our beloved Swami Lakshmanju Maharaj, to all my Acharyas, and my pranams to all the listeners who have tuned in. I would like to first thank the organizers of this talk, Jnanendra ji and others of Kashmir Shaiva Institute. And I'd like to begin my talk with a small disclaimer, which is that any mistakes that arise in this talk of mine is my own, and any aspect that is correct and useful for you, know it to be Swamiji's glory. Ācārya Abhinavagupta requires no introduction. A lot has been spoken about him in the last few years. Many lectures and talks of great scholars have been conducted in this platform about Ācārya's life, his primary works like the Tantra Loka, Tantra Sara, etc. A repetition of the same this year seems redundant to me and perhaps even above my capacity. My interest and consequently my own approach to Shastra has been to explore the teachings of Mahamaheshwara and Swamiji with an emphasis on how it can be employed as a sadhana in our daily life. Therefore, I have chosen to take just a very small section of Mahamaheshwaracharya's teachings, 2 slokas in fact, and share with you the import of it and the wonderful gifts that its contemplation gives us. Even if it is just 2 slokas, given that it is penned by Mahamaheshwaracharya and that it is given so much attention within the oral tradition, it is evident that the power of the slokas is infinite and therefore fully capable of making us fit to receive the highest grace and attain the state of Shivatvam if practiced and absorbed in totality. Like a small antibiotic tablet is capable of killing thousands of bacteria and relieving us of disease, these 2 slokas are capable of relieving us of the disease of samsara bhiti, the fear of samsara. But for this, it must be digested completely and must be assimilated fully. This talk consists of 4 parts. Firstly, the recitation of the slokas. Secondly, the understanding of its meaning as explained by Swamiji. Thirdly, some exploration regarding the subject matter. And fourthly, we will discuss the upayas that are indicated in the slokas and how to practice them. So that being said, let's get into the subject matter. In his spectacular commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, the Gitartha Sangraha by Ācārya Abhinavagupta, he makes a reference to a work of his called the Shiva Shakti Avinabhava Stotra. Quoting verses from this stotra, Ācārya writes 2 verses on worshipping Devi, which has come to be known in the Kashmir Shaiva tradition as the Devi Stotra, the Devi Stava, or the Shiva Shakti Stotra. This reference to Devi in the context of his explanation to the verses on the nature of the Purushottama, which is present in chapter 15. And they have been stated only passingly by Mahamaheshwara. However, as is always the case with his work, we cannot gloss over it if we consider ourselves to be true devotees of his genius. The beauty and the depth of these verses are very profound, and within the oral tradition, they are held in very high esteem. Let us chant the slokas before proceeding further. Tava Kanchana Stutirambike Sakala Shabdamayi Kilate Tanu Nikilamurtishu Me Bhavadan Vayo Manasija Subahesh Prasara Sucha Iti Vichintya Shive Shamita Shive Jagati Jatamayat Navashadidam Tuti Japachana Chintanavarjita Nakaluka Chanakalakalapime. The translation is given by Swami Lakshmanju as follows. O Divine Mother Ambika, there is nothing whatsoever in the form of a spoken word which is not your hymn, or which does not constitute praise to thee. Whether one prays reverently in the place of worship, or whether one is engaged in worldly talk, in reality it is all a praise of you. Because all words and all sounds are made of letters that pervade your body. By virtue of this, whatever forms appear in this universe, or whatever ideas or thoughts arise in my mind, be they good or bad, they invariably afford me the opportunity to perceive you and embrace you, O Mother. Thus, O Mother, O the consort of the Supreme Bhairava, you are ever intent on removing all our afflictions and sufferings without any effort on my part. Therefore, there is neither any action like meditation, puja, nor are there any words like singing praises or uttering mantras, which do not constitute my worship of you. This talk is not an explanation of the word-by-word meanings of the slokas, as it is already available online. This is not a commentary or an interpretation of these verses, as I don't consider myself an adhikari for this feat. However, any sadhaka who takes a dip in the infinite ocean of pure knowledge, that is the works of Ācārya Abhinavagupta, cannot be expected to return dry and untouched by its divine waters. My intention is simply to share some insights that I have received in the course of exploring these verses, with the prayer that it will serve you as well as others in your own sadhana. The first question that we need to ask about the verses here is, what is the object of worship that is mentioned here? That is Devi. Who is Devi? Does Mahamaheshwara mean a particular goddess? If so, which one? Swami Lakshmanju, in his explanation to the Devi Stotra, clarifies that the Devi being referred to here is Swatantriya Shakti. Let us understand what Swatantriya Shakti is. Swatantriya Shakti can be defined as the absolute, ubiquitous freedom of Lord Shiva. She is absolute because there is no higher Shakti than her. She is ubiquitous because she is present everywhere, at all levels, from the highest to the lowest, and at all times. And she is of the form of freedom because she is the supreme will of Lord Shiva. Therefore, Swami Lakshmanju describes her elsewhere as the free will of Bhairava, which is the source of his infinite Shaktis, of which the major ones are 5 in number, namely Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. With reference to the Shaktis mentioned, Swatantriya Shakti can be explained as absolute freedom in Icha, Jnana, and Kriya. There is a tendency among spiritual communities to refer to Shakti as power or energy. It is really not so, because Shakti is a Sanskrit non-translatable. A better description, if not a perfect one, is conscious, intelligent, or creative power. Chiti swatantra vishwa siddhi hetuhu swechaya swabhitau vishwam unmilayati, says the Pratibhijna Hridaya. Here the conscious and the intelligent or the creative aspects are highlighted by the fact that Vishwa Siddhi, that is the manifestation of the universe, is caused by her own free will, with her own body as the ground of this manifestation. Elsewhere, it is mentioned that Vishwa Siddhi is caused by the blossoming of Chidananda. So the fullness of Chidananda is another reference to Swatantra Shakti. Being the absolute ubiquitous freedom of Lord Shiva, she is understood to be the very nature of Shiva, just as heat and light are the very nature of fire. Swatantra Shakti has also been given a lot of synonyms by Ācārya Abhinavagupta in his work, the Parapraveshika. Therefore, Shakti must be understood to be the same as Vimarsha, Chaitanya, Paravak, Spuratta, Spanda, and Hridayam, amongst others. The varying facets of Swatantra Shakti are to be understood as varying ways of seeing the same Shakti principle within the frameworks of the sub-traditions of Kashmir Shaivism. Now one might ask the question, the word Devi is not used in these verses. Instead, the word Ambika is used. So why is Devi being called Ambika over here? The word Ambika means mother. Devi is designated as Ambika because she is the mother of the universe. That is, she has caused the universe to manifest. Again, quoting the first two sutras of the Pratibhijna Hridaya, which translates to the absolute chitti of its own free will is the cause of the siddhi of the universe. And by the power of her own free will, she unfolds the universe with herself as the screen. Chitti here is chit, consciousness, with Swatantra Shakti. And so Chitti is the cause of the manifest universe. Not only is she the cause, but she is also the background and the substance of the manifest universe. A paradigm very similar to this is how a mother carries her baby in her womb. The baby is created in her own body using her own energies and is held within her, totally one with her and yet seemingly separate. In the Parapraveshika, Samvit Bhagavati, who is nothing but Chitti, is venerated as one who is Vishwatmikam and Uttirnam, indicating that she is not only immanent, but is also transcendental to the universe. Moreover, it is important to note that she is not only universal, but is also deeply individual in nature, as is indicated by the dictum, Sarvam Sarvatmaka. Everythingness is of the nature of every individual thing. Therefore, she is Shakti and she is the nature of all things that exist. Thus, it is clear why Devi is affectionately and devotedly referred to as Ambika by Mahamaheshwaracharya here. By this reference, he seeks to celebrate her role as the mother of the universe and the primordial cause, the source, and the substance of all that exists. We must also take a minute to examine the relationship between Mahamaheshwaracharya with his own biological mother. For our vision of the divine is often colored by the relationships that we have in our own lives. Mahamaheshwaracharya lost his mother at a very early age. The loss of such an important relationship at a young age would have had a very deep impact on him. One could even say that it caused a great deal of pain, and from it emerged a clear understanding that only the attainment of the divine can give true and lasting happiness. He states in the Tantra Loka that only a person like him can know the pain of separation from his mother. Mahamaheshwaracharya transformed this pain into the raging fires of seeking the Divine Mother. He declares thus that the Matru Tattva has been the guiding force of his life. Mata Param Bandhuri. For us devotees, these statements give a clue about the adhikaritvam required to attain the Mother. One must know the pain of separation from her and then convert this pain into an intense seeking for her. The most well-known Mangalacharana of Mahamaheshwaracharya starts with an ode to his mother Vimala, who for him is both his biological mother as well as the supreme Swatantra Shakti. Vimala Kala Ācārya Abhinavagupta Mahajanani. This was used as the Mangalacharana in all his important works, which goes to show that these verses are the essence, the sara of his philosophy. Now, coming to certain important aspects of these slokas, aspects which, when examined, will help us get a deeper understanding of the slokas. What is the nature of her worship as is described in the Devi Stotra? The Devi Stotra describes a vision of the manifest world which is in line with the core philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism. Consciousness is not just transcendental, but is also equally immanent at the same time. And this is possible owing to the ubiquitous freedom of Shiva, that is, Devi. The mechanics of immanence achieved by consciousness, Chitti, through her expansion, is what is called the Shadadvas, that is, the sixfold pathways. These constitute two types of pathways, mainly the Vachya, which is the objective cycle or that which is indicated, and the Vachaka, the subjective cycle or that which indicates. Vachakadva, or the subjective pathway, means the path which begins with letters, then words, and then sentences, whereas Vachyadva, or the objective pathway, means the path of the kalas, the enclosures, the tattvas, the 36 tattvas, and the bhuvanas, of which there are 118 of them. All the upayas, which are the techniques of worship that I mentioned in Kashmir Shaivism, as well as all the results of worship, are all traceable within these advas. Since these advas constitute the aspect of immanence, that is the expansion of her universal body, all that is immanent thus constitutes an exploration of her own body. Ācārya Bhattanarayana gives a very similar prayer in his great devotional work, the Stava Chintamani. By which path are you not achieved? By which word does not indicate you? Which meditation does not have you as its goal? What is existing in the world is one with you, O Prabhu. It is very clear that in this tradition, worship is understood very differently from normal, everyday understanding of worship. In this darshana, the worshipper, the means, the method, the one who is worshipped, and the impediments of worship, whose removal is the purpose behind the worship, are all one with absolute universal consciousness. The spirit of this form of Advaita Bhakti, that is integral to Kashmir Shaivism, is captured very succinctly in the first verse of the Shiva Drishti by Ācārya Somananda. Asmat Rupa Samavishta Swatma Natma Nivarani Shiva Karotu Nijaya Namashaktya Tatatmani. Let Shiva, who is my own nature, bow down to his real nature, the universal Shiva, through his own Shakti, for the removal of bondages and obstacles, which are also Shiva. Another interesting observation about Devi Stava is the use of the negative sense. Now, Ācārya Abhinavagupta could have easily stated that all forms, all names are Devi, and all acts are a worship of her. However, he uses the negative mode to question, as though in a state of awe. What is not her name? What is not her form? What is not her worship? One could argue that this is only to invoke a certain poetic beauty that he states it this way. However, with Ācārya, I beg to differ. It couldn't be that simple. Perhaps there is more to examine here. The background for this is to understand that in our experience, in its most natural, primordial form, it is universal in nature. That is, God consciousness is our most natural state, and the limited state that we are in right now is in reality artificial. Any exclusion is therefore by definition moving away from universality. Exclusion can be understood as a form of limitation in itself. When seen in this light, the three malas, which are the impurities that limit us, are essentially the effects of some sort of exclusion of experience. And so are the case with the Panchakanchukas and Maya and Tattvaski. Could it be that the negative sense that is used here by Ācārya Abhinavagupta is to emphasize the negation of the exclusion of experience? That is, we don't talk of expansion of our own self, but rather the removal of everything that limits us. By this emphasis on negation, on negation of the limitations, the capacity to embrace our universal nature naturally grows, and as we attain our natural state of oneness with Lord Shiva. The exclusivity of certain names and forms as belonging to Devi and certain acts alone constituting her worship, while they are important in the beginning, are being challenged and broken down in this particular view. Most importantly, the negative sense also includes the transcendental aspect of Devi. That is, the nameless and the formless is also Devi, and the lack of all action is also her worship. In effect, everythingness and nothingness are both embraced and integrated, and this is what we call Purnata. Do note that this negation of exclusion is different from the negation implied by the Niti-Niti process. The former destroys the barriers that limit our understanding, whereas the latter is meant only to discover the transcendental nature of the self. Now we come to the most important part of this talk, which is the sadhana involved. So let us discuss what is the sadhana that is indicated in the slokas. That is, what are the upayas that are used to recognize her. The first and the most easiest, but yet the most important also, is the recitation of the verse every day with awareness and as many times as possible. What happens when we repeat something? The shabda, the sound of the slokas, they come from Bhairava himself, Abhinavagupta. And they will enter into us and slowly remove the limitations that prevent us from experiencing the reality that is indicated in the slokas. This means that by meditating on the sound of the slokas, its meaning and full import becomes revealed in the heart of the sadhaka. Mananam. Mananam is understanding the meaning and further explanations. For this, you can refer to the original context in which the sloka is mentioned in the Getartha Sangraha. You can check out Swamiji's explanation of the sloka itself. And you can also check out some of the aspects that we have covered in this talk. You can contemplate on this with regard to your own life as well. How does it connect with your life? How does it connect with your day-to-day activities? What are the ways in which you can modify your day-to-day life so as to be more aligned to the pursuit of Devi? The third form of sadhana has to do with expanding our awareness. This is something that Swami Lakshmanju used to emphasize a lot, awareness. The first verses of the Devi Stava describe her nature as all forms and words, and this is essentially a form of dharana. What is the dharana? The dharana is simply to be more aware of this reality that is already there in our life. Any sound that we hear, become aware of Devi. Any sound, any form that we see, become aware of Devi. Any work that we do, become aware of the presence of Devi in the very activity of this work. By the cultivation of this dharana, the sadhaka, with the grace of Lord Shiva, realizes that in his lived experience. He then abides in this recognition that the very existence is Devi herself, wherever, whenever, and howsoever it is examined. In the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, a very similar dharana is mentioned, the 90th dharana. Swami Lakshmanju comments on it as follows. Wherever the mind goes, whether outside or within, there itself is the state of Shiva. Since he is all-pervading, where else can the mind go? Here too, the emphasis is not on a rigid concentration on something exclusive, but rather a universal expansion of one's awareness. What happens when we continue to do the sadhana and the sadhana progresses? The recognition of Devi as all substance of all forms, all names, and all acts has some very extraordinary consequences in the life of a yogi. It effectively blurs the rigid boundaries between what we call spiritual practice and worldly day-to-day activities. Every sadhaka, as you already know, struggles with this dichotomy, and despite the intellectual understanding that no realm of life remains separate from the mother, they still struggle. If the sadhana is done well, it has the capacity to remove this dichotomy. In the second verse, Ācārya Abhinavagupta states clearly that it is not only stuti, japa, archana, chintana, etc. that constitutes her worship, but each and every act of life is by default her worship. One might ask at this juncture, why then must we do sadhana? Can we drop all our meditations and live as we please? Here one must remember that the second verse is a natural consequence of the first one. It is a state of being that naturally arises as a result of doing the sadhana. Therefore, the question of doing and not doing does not arise to the yogi who is established in the dharana mentioned in the first verse. Because everything he experiences is nothing but the worship of Devi, both in action as well as in inaction. Now, to conclude, let us summarize what we have covered in this very short talk. We discussed about Ācārya Abhinavagupta's Devi Stotra, which, although comprises just 2 verses, is a great Amrita Sindhu, an ocean of immortal bliss. And it is capable of bestowing the Paramadam. We discussed its meaning, some of its finer points, and we try to gauge the mind behind this beautiful creation and what Ācārya wants to teach us and why. We also discussed the method of sadhana that we can use to realize the truth that the slokas indicate and worship Devi the way Mahamaheshwaracharya envisions it to be. Finally, we discussed some of the symptoms of progress and the siddhi that comes with such a sadhana. The Devi Stotra is a testimony to the genius of Ācārya Abhinavagupta and is definitive evidence that he is verily the embodied form of this Parabhairava, who is Anuttara and Anakhya. I offer these words at the divine feet of Mahamaheshwaracharya and pray for his anugraha to all of us in this Jayanti. May his teachings enlighten us all. Om Purnamata Purnamitam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamataya Purnameva Vashishyate Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Jai Gurudev.